After my rebirth, I discovered something terrifying. My three sisters could somehow hear the thoughts I never spoke aloud. So now I keep wondering, should I warn my eldest sister, Jessica, that the man she's treating like a treasure will one day strip her of everything she owns? The instant she reached for Ryan's hand, I noticed her fingers twitch, as if my thoughts had brushed against her mind. Maybe I should stay silent. Then again, should I tell my second sister, Olivia, that Ryan is the reason she'll eventually lose her sight? The moment that thought crossed my mind, Olivia jerked upright from his side as though she'd been stabbed by something sharp. And Chloe, if my youngest sister knew that she'd spend the rest of her days breathing without truly living, trapped in a hospital bed because of the accident Ryan designed for her, would she be able to bear it? I had barely finished that thought when Olivia, who had been gently feeding Ryan, suddenly tipped the bowl straight over his head. This is driving me insane. Do I tell them the truth, or do I keep my mouth shut? Ryan never came here out of loyalty. Every kind gesture, every rescue, every smile of his has a purpose. He's not protecting the Prescott family. He's carefully breaking it apart from the inside, clearing the path for the woman he actually wants to everyone else. Ryan is just the Prescott family's newly hired butler. But what no one knows is that he came equipped with some absurd, unfair charm system. By a string of convenient coincidences, he became the man who saved my three sisters from danger. Little by little, he earned their trust, their dependence, and eventually their devotion. The same sisters who once looked down on everyone became his sharpest weapons, using the Prescott name, power, and wealth to hand him everything he could ever want. And me. I became the villain in their story, because I couldn't stand watching him steal the place that used to be mine. I fought him again and again. I tried to expose him. I tried to stop him. I even set traps for him, desperate to make my sisters see what kind of monster they had let into our home. But every single time, I failed. In the end, my resistance only pushed them further away. My sisters stopped doubting Ryan and started hating me instead, Jessica, my eldest sister. The ruthless president who ruled the business world with ice in her veins, cut off every one of my bank cards and threw me out of the Prescott estate without a second thought. Olivia, my second sister, the soft-spoken doctor everyone praised for her kindness, tampered with my medicine in secret and left me trapped in endless pain. Chloe, my youngest sister, the glamorous celebrity adored by millions, concealed who I really was and let her fan base tear me apart online until there was almost nothing left of me. My ending was miserable. By the time I died, I had become so unwanted that not even a single person came to claim my body. The final memory burned into me was of the four of them standing in that run-down rental room. The wallpaper was peeling, the air smelled stale. I sat there in a wheelchair, wrapped in grimy clothes, stained with old oil and dirt, while Ryan stood in front of me wearing tailored luxury pieces he never could have afforded before. He looked polished, superior, untouchable, and around him stood my three sisters, guarding him like he was the most precious thing in the world. Ryan turned his face toward me and smiled from the corner of his mouth. "We used to be friends," he said lightly. "So if you kneel today, apologize properly, and call me your brother-in-law, I'll be generous enough to forgive you. I might even let you return to the Prescott family. What do you say?" One of them immediately echoed him. "Go on. Call him brother-in-law, brother-in-law." The word nearly made me laugh. Was he worthy of that title? The same man who had ruined my face, crippled my body, and shamelessly wormed his way into the Prescott family only so he could destroy it? But the cruelest part was that nobody believed a single word I said. To everyone around me, I was nothing more than a bitter, jealous failure who couldn't accept that Ryan had replaced me. They all thought I deserved what happened. I locked my jaw and spat at him with all the strength I had left. "You worthy?" I rasped. "I'd die first, before calling you that. One day, everyone will see what kind of filth you really are." I never got to finish. A violent slap crashed across my face and sent my head snapping to the side. My mouth filled with blood instantly. The force was so brutal I felt several teeth shift loose, and a deaf ringing swallowed up the room. I struggled to lift my eyes, only to meet Jessica's frozen stare. Her expression held nothing but disgust. She looked at me the way someone looks at something rotten. "Ethan," she said coldly, "if you don't know how to watch your tongue, I can help by ripping it out." My hand trembled as I pressed it against my burning cheek. I bit down, tasting iron. "Sis, don't call me that." Her interruption was sharp enough to cut skin. "From the moment you tried to set Ryan up, you stopped being our brother." Those words hit harder than the slap. It felt as though blades were being driven straight into a heart that had already been torn open too many times. Whatever little hope still lived inside me began to fade. Even the light in my eyes seemed to dim. I wanted to answer. I wanted to scream the truth one last time, but my throat was cracked and dry, and no sound would come. Then the pain in my chest turned sudden, familiar, merciless. I clawed at my shirt and bent forward, fighting for breath. "My medicine," I gasped. Medicine. Olivia had nearly quit smoking a long time ago, but ever since Ryan entered our lives, she'd picked the habit back up all over again. She stepped closer without a trace of hesitation, then pressed the glowing tip of her cigarette into the back of my hand. The flesh sizzled instantly. I choked on my cry, but Olivia didn't even blink. Instead, she pointed at my chest and let out a cold, mocking laugh. "Ethan, maybe the reason you were born with a bad heart is because your heart was rotten from the very beginning. Something like that probably isn't worth saving." The pain was so sharp that I lost what little balance I had left and tumbled straight out of the wheelchair. My chest tightened at once, as if an invisible hand were crushing my lungs. I could barely drag in air. Chloe slowly lowered herself into a crouch and stared at me, her brows drawing together as she looked at how thin I had become. I was nothing but skin stretched over bones now, a broken shape on the floor. "Why are you pretending to be pathetic?" she asked, her voice full of impatience. "Ethan, do you actually think acting this miserable will make us forgive you?" "Stop dreaming." Then she paused, and her gaze sharpened. "Besides, it seems like you still haven't learned your lesson." I knew exactly what she meant, all because I had cursed Ryan once, just once. Chloe allowed her fans to hunt me down online and in real life. They flooded every corner of the internet with insults and rumors. Some of the more obsessive ones even tracked me in person. They shoved me out of my wheelchair, laughed while I crawled across the ground like an animal, and sometimes left dead rats outside my door just to watch me break. Eventually, even the landlord grew sick of the trouble and threw me out. After that, the only place I could afford was this crumbling shack beside a garbage dump. The door wouldn't lock. The walls leaked wind. The stench never faded. And now, without my medication, even something as simple as breathing had become almost impossible. I collapsed on the filthy floor, covered in bruises and wounds, gasping like a fish thrown onto dry land. My vision blurred in and out. My mind tried desperately to remember one happy thing from my life, just one memory that didn't hurt, but there was nothing. Not a single moment I could hold on to without pain. My hands stretched weakly toward my sisters. Reaching for help, not one of them took it. They simply turned around and walked away. The only thing they left behind was a low, disgusted curse. Pathetic. I parted my lips one last time, wanting to say something. Anything at all, but I no longer had the strength to fight, because this was already my second rebirth. I had been careful this time. I had plotted every move, thought through every possibility, tried again and again to change the ending, but no matter what I did, I still couldn't defeat the halo protecting the so-called chosen male lead. This world was built like one of those absurd Lucky Charm novels, and Ryan was the male protagonist. His purpose in the story was simple: destroy the Prescott family, wipe away every obstacle in his path, and make room for the woman he truly loved. My three sisters were the story's villains. They were always destined to fall for him. At first sight, they would be drawn in. Then he would save them again and again, earning their trust, their gratitude, and eventually their complete devotion. One by one, they would throw away their pride, their judgment, even their futures, and willingly become the knives in his hands. They would pour their power, status, wealth, and every resource the Prescott family possessed into helping him rise. When Ryan was in danger, they would protect him without hesitation. one would lose her ability to walk, one would lose her sight forever, and one would be reduced to a body that lived without waking. Trapped in endless silence, I knew all of this. That was why I had tried so desperately to expose Ryan from the very beginning. I wanted them to see his real intentions before it was too late. But in their eyes, I was never the one trying to save them. I was only the jealous brother who couldn't accept that Ryan had taken my place. And so, I fell. From the Prescott family's young Misterdo, a ruined cripple with a disfigured face, a Bon. I lifted a hand to my throat and forced myself to try to speak. No matter what, I couldn't let Ryan feel wronged again. If he did, those three sisters who doted on him would only find another reason to make my life even worse. But no matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't form a complete sentence. Jessica's gaze moved slowly between Ryan and me, her expression unreadable, her eyes dark and deep. "Ethan," she said at last, her tone carrying quiet disappointment, "is this what a Prescott has been taught?" Whatever the case, Ryan prepared this out of kindness. Even if you don't like it, you should at least accept it. I lowered my eyes, a cold laugh echoing inside my chest. Of course, by now, the three of them saw no one but Ryan. How could I possibly look down on him? Very soon, he would become the true other master of the Prescott house. And me. I was just the useless cripple who would eventually be cast out and left to rot in the slums. What standing did I have to despise him? Anyone seeing the way you all protect him would think Ryan was your real brother. No, not brother. More like the precious little favorite you've all fallen for. And tell me, does anyone here even remember that I'm allergic to seafood? Or does my life simply not matter enough to remember? For a brief moment, the whole table fell into silence. Just seconds earlier, the atmosphere had still been lively. But now the smiles on all three women's faces vanished, and the warmth in the room seemed to freeze over. I lowered my head and forced the rich seafood down one bite at a time. Even while nausea churned violently in my stomach, I swallowed it all back with sheer willpower, then looked up at Ryan and made myself smile. Jessica's face had turned dark, as though some secret thought had suddenly been dragged into the light. She watched me finish the entire plate. When she saw my complexion turning pale and noticed me rise to leave, she abruptly reached out. "Ethan," before she could say more, Olivia shot her a warning look, signaling her to stop. Then she turned to me, her voice soft and careful. "Ethan, are you feeling unwell today? Let me check on you, all right?" She was a doctor in my last life. She had been the one prescribing the medicine that kept my heart. Condition under control. And she had also been the one to quietly cut it off. She watched me suffer day after day without the slightest hesitation, as if she had long forgotten I was once the brother she treasured most. I stood halfway up the stairs and looked back at them. My face was hidden in shadow, so no one could clearly see my expression. "It's just a small allergy," I said flatly. "It won't kill me." Then after a pause, I added in a tired voice, "I'm exhausted. Stop making things difficult for me." "I'll agree to whatever you want." Olivia froze where she stood. The color drained from her face almost immediately. I didn't mean to forget you're allergic to seafood. Didn't mean to forget. What a ridiculous excuse. What a careless, affable explanation. I suddenly had no patience left for any of their performances. Without bothering to say another word, I turned and walked away, not once looking back the moment Ryan entered our lives. I already understood something. No matter what I said, no matter what I did, I would always be the one they chose last. So this time, I decided not to fight anymore. A sudden knock at the door yanked me back from the mess of thoughts in my head. Ryan had come again. Outside, he wore that same familiar expression of wounded innocence, the one that could make anyone's heart soften. His voice was hoarse with emotion as he knocked again and again, as if he wouldn't stop until I opened the door. "Ethan, what's wrong? Did I do something to upset you?" he asked, sounding choked with tears. "If I did, then I'll apologize, okay? Please don't ignore me. Aren't we best friends?" His voice sounded painfully sincere, pitiful even. But at the exact same moment, another voice rang out in my ear. It was Ryan's voice too yet. What it said was the complete opposite of the words coming from outside the door. What the hell is wrong with Ethan? None of this was supposed to happen according to the script. Now those female supporting characters think I'm the one bullying him? My affection points just dropped by 10. A second voice followed at once. Mechanical. Emotionless. Please rest assured, host. I've already checked. Their favorability toward you is still above 50. The points lost remain within manageable range. In that instant, it felt as if I had been dropped into an icy abyss. A chill rushed up from the soles of my feet, crawled along my spine, and settled at the back of my neck. Even though the room was warm, my whole body started trembling uncontrollably. Those voices again, in my previous life. After Ryan framed me and I was knocked unconscious in that car accident, I had often heard him speaking in a low voice with that same mechanical system whenever he thought no one was paying attention. Heard their plans. I heard them talk about destroying the Prescott family and using its downfall as the step Ryan needed to climb higher. The moment I woke up, I rushed to Jessica and told her everything, but no matter how desperately I tried to explain, the only thing I got in return was the disgust in her eyes. Before I could even finish, Ryan walked out of Jessica's private study room. No one else in the family was ever allowed to enter wearing the perfect expression of harmless grievance, like some gentle, self-sacrificing saint. Jessica, he said softly. Maybe Ethan was just confused for a moment and acted impulsively. It's all right. I don't blame him. His fake generosity only made Jessica's expression grow colder. Then she turned to me and rebuked me in a low, disappointed voice. Ethan, how did you become like this? First, you failed to frame Ryan with the car accident, and now you're trying to smear him in front of me? While you were unconscious, he stayed by your side and took care of you the whole time. He even begged me not to blame you. I couldn't remember everything that happened after that. Only one thing remained painfully clear from that moment on. I was truly abandoned by the Prescott family. My luggage was pitifully small. Just a single suitcase with a few plain clothes stuffed inside. It was raining heavily that day. The sky was dark, the road drenched, and mud splashed everywhere. Yet Jessica's face never changed as she shoved me out through the gate without mercy. She stood there looking down at me, filthy and soaked, as if I were something not worth touching. Ethan, she said coldly, since you can't tolerate Ryan, then from today onward, the Prescott family no longer acknowledges you as its young master. Then she gave me one final glance, full of contempt. And once you lose the title of Prescott Young Master, what do you think you're worth? Just remembering it made my body tremble all over again. So what was Ryan trying to do this time? I didn't even need to think about it. I knew he wasn't standing outside alone, whoever he had brought this time. Whatever favor he was trying to earn, it no longer mattered. It had nothing to do with me anymore. Sooner or later, I was leaving the Prescott house anyway. Knowing I couldn't avoid this forever, I took a slow breath and opened the door. Ryan's hand, which had still been lifted to knock again, froze in midair, not the least bit embarrassed. He immediately reached out as if to grab my hand. I stepped aside before he could touch me, Ethan. Then his eyes flicked toward Chloe, who was standing just behind him. If something's bothering you, just tell me, all right? Don't keep shutting me out. In my last life, he was only ever extra gentle with me when one of my sisters was nearby. So this performance? Now is obviously for Chloe to see. Chloe stayed quiet for a long while before finally speaking, but just as I expected, the first person she defended was Ryan. She studied me carefully, and although her face remained calm, there was a trace of concern buried deep in her eyes. Ethan, Jessica and Olivia have already told me what's been going on these past few days. Is there some misunderstanding between you and Ryan? She asked in a low voice. Didn't the two of you used to get along well? Do you even know how many times he secretly cried because you've been avoiding him lately? Then she sighed, as if she truly cared about me. I happen to know a very famous psychologist. If there's something you don't want to say to Jessica or Olivia, you can tell me. Tomorrow, I'll take you to see them, all right? So that was it. Without knowing the truth, without asking what had actually happened, she had already decided I was the problem. She wanted to send me to a psychologist. A bitter laugh nearly escaped me. Right, I said. So in your eyes, anyone who dislikes Ryan must be mentally ill. Is that it? My voice turned colder with each word. When you let your fans gang up on me and tear me apart online, I didn't see you worrying about my mental state then. I looked straight at her. So what is this now? Are you doing this to help Ryan vent his anger again? Or this time? Are you planning to lock me up in a psychiatric hospital instead? Chloe went still. Then, little by little, her expression began to harden and twist. She looked at Ryan first, then at me, and finally lowered her gaze to her own hands, as though she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Ethan. Chloe started slowly, her voice unusually uncertain. Did I do something wrong? Please. Don't hate me, all right. The moment I heard that, every nerve in my body tense. My expression turned guarded at once. I shook my head without saying anything and immediately shut the door again, the instant it closed. I heard a dull thud from outside, followed by Ryan's sharp cry of pain. Oh, Chloe. Dear then, the mechanical voice screamed in alarm. Warning. Female supporting character Chloe's affection has decreased by 10 points. Current affection has fallen below 50. Host, please take immediate action to restore it. Don't call me that. Chloe's voice sounded much colder now, edged with something dark. Maybe those two idiots upstairs were fooled by your act. But I wasn't. You better explain yourself right now. Or I don't mind, I didn't hear the rest. Most likely, they had already moved farther away. I didn't understand why Chloe's attitude had shifted so suddenly. And frankly, I had no interest in figuring it out. Looking at how fiercely the three of them were already protecting Ryan, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything from my last life replayed itself all over again. Whatever. Ryan wanted to do to the Prescott family had nothing to do with me now. For me, there was only one thing that mattered more than anything else: staying alive after that. I rarely went back to the Prescott house, and because of that, Ryan began appearing there more and more often. The Prescott family had always concealed my identity from outsiders, partly because of my health and partly because they wanted to avoid unnecessary attention. People only knew that the Prescotts had a young master who had been frail since childhood and was cherished by the whole family, but no one knew what I actually looked like. Now, Ryan had practically stepped into that role himself. He never openly admitted it, but he never denied it either. Whenever someone brought it up, he would only lower his eyes, purse his lips, and smile faintly without answering to other people. That silence was as good as a confession. They had already begun treating him as if he were the real Prescott young master. My roommate, Mark, glanced over at me one day and let out a mocking laugh. Ethan, how come you and Ryan aren't hanging around together anymore? He asked with a sneer. Weren't you two riding to school in the Prescott family car together at the beginning of the semester? What happened? Had a falling out? Or did Ryan finally stop letting you tag along in the Prescott car? I only glanced at him once and lowered my head and continued sorting through my assignments as if I hadn't heard a thing. But my indifference seemed to hit a nerve. Mark slammed his phone onto the table. The sound effect of a game character dying burst from the speaker, and his expression darkened instantly. Ryan doesn't even bother with you anymore, and you still keep putting on airs? He snapped. You failed to cling to the Prescott family. So stop acting so high and mighty. Ryan, who was sitting beside him, immediately put on an awkward expression and tugged lightly at Mark's sleeve. Mark, forget it, he said in a low voice. Everyone already knows Ethan doesn't like me. I can't force him to be friends with me. Mark crossed his arms and gave a cold snort. I just can't stand how fake he acts. Wasn't he the one desperately trying to get close to you before? So what's this supposed to be now? As he spoke, he lowered his head for a moment like he was thinking something over, then looked back at me with a harsh, malicious glare. Fine, he said. Let's see how long you can keep pretending. After throwing out those threats, the two of them turned and left. But just before Ryan pulled the dorm door shut behind him, he glanced back at me, There was no grievance in his eyes anymore, only calculation then. I heard him speak to the system again. System. Who has the highest affection level right now? The system answered immediately. Currently, Jessica ranks highest. However, you need to act quickly. An affection level of 60 is still far from sufficient. You must raise her affection to at least 80 within 1 week, or you will lose access to the upcoming plot forecast. Upcoming plot forecast. The moment I heard those words, I remembered Jessica was supposed to go out to sign a contract soon, only to end up trapped at sea because of an unexpected incident. Ryan would appear at the critical moment, save her, and that event would become the foundation of their emotional bond. I didn't care. What did any of it have to do with me? I packed up my books and notes and headed for the library. But the strange looks I received on the way made me pause. Someone nearby pointed in my direction. Isn't that him? The one everyone's talking about on the forum? Yeah, that's Ethan, right? The ruthless social climber? I heard he fell out with Ryan because he tried to use Ryan to get close to the Prescott sisters and failed. What? Seriously. That's disgusting. Used to always see him stuck to Ryan. No wonder the two of them don't even speak now. Well, if your so-called friend tried to seduce your sisters, would you still talk to him? True. This Ethan guy is shameless. He could have lived like a normal person. But instead, he chose to dream about being kept by a rich family. Their voices were loud enough that none of it could be mistaken for whispers. Every word was deliberate. Every sentence was meant for me to hear. I kept my eyes lowered and continued walking, hoping the whispers would die down if I pretended not to hear them. But before I could take more than a few steps, a familiar voice cut cleanly through the noise and nailed me in place. Ethan. My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. Ryan had appeared again. I didn't know when he got there. But somehow he was already standing near the library entrance, perfectly placed where everyone could see him. He hurried toward me in front of the crowd and caught my wrist before I could turn away. His grip was warm. Mine went cold. Don't listen to them, he said softly, loud enough for the people around us to hear every word. They misunderstood everything. Even if nobody else believes you, I do. I almost laughed. What a clean, beautiful sentence. Not a single word of proof. Not one real explanation. Just enough vague kindness to make himself look noble while leaving me buried under suspicion to outsiders. It would only sound as if Ryan was being generous again, patient, again merciful again, and I would still be the one with stains that couldn't be washed off. I said nothing, my silence, of course, only made everything worse. The people nearby started whispering more boldly than before, and the looks aimed at me grew sharper. Ryan's eyes reddened on cue, his expression turning so hurt that anyone seeing it would think I had wronged him in some unforgivable way. He really only had one trick: tears, softness, injury, and somehow it worked every single time. I tried to pull my hand free, but his fingers tightened as if he was terrified I would leave him behind. At that exact moment, the voice I hated most rang out in the air, near him again, cold, mechanical, emotionless. Warning. Female target Chloe is approaching current location. Host is advised to maintain persona. Avoid any behavior that may cause affection loss. Ryan's eyes shifted for the briefest second. Then his entire expression changed. He raised his voice immediately, sounding even more desperate than before. Stop saying those things about Ethan. He isn't that kind of person. You're all wrong about him. Performance was flawless. If I hadn't heard that system with my own ears, maybe even I would have thought he cared. How? Ridiculous. A man publicly defending me with one hand while using the other to push me deeper into the mud. I lowered my gaze and looked at the red marks forming around my wrist where he held me too tightly. Then a female voice cut. Across the crowd from behind, not that kind of person? The surrounding students turned instantly. Even hidden beneath sunglasses and a cap, Chloe was impossible to miss. Her figure, her presence, the way people reacted the moment they recognized her, it was enough. Someone gasped her name. Then the noise swelled at once. Why is she here? She must have come for Ryan. I knew it. She's definitely here to protect him. The commotion rose like a wave, but I felt strangely far away from all of it, as if I were standing outside my own life and watching it happen to someone else. So this was the next act. Fine if Chloe had come. Then the show should be over soon. Maybe she'd slap me again. Maybe she'd humiliate me in front of everyone. Maybe she'd drag me back into whatever fresh hell Rianne had prepared. None of it would surprise me. But instead of stopping beside Rianne, Chloe walked straight past him. Then she stopped in front of me. In her hands was a small cake, box tied with a pale ribbon. When she lifted it toward me, even the air around us seemed to freeze. "Ethan," she said. And for once, her voice carried none of its usual sharpness. "I've been overloaded with work lately, so I haven't had time to visit you. Are you getting used to the dorm? If you don't like it there, move into my apartment near campus. It'll be quieter." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then she held the box out a little more. "I bought you strawberry cake," she added softly. "I know this isn't from the bakery you like best. I was in a hurry today. Next time, I'll get that one for you instead." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ryan's expression changed first. The helpless sorrow on his face stiffened. His jaw tightened, almost invisibly, and a darkness flickered through his eyes before he smothered it again. I didn't move. I stared at the cake. But I had no intention of taking it. My mind had already filled with older images, ones I had spent too long trying to bury. Crowded hallways. Anonymous. Posts, photos taken from twisted angles, cruel captions, thousands of strangers laughing as they guessed what kind of relationship I had with my own sister. And behind it all, Chloe's fan base tearing into me like starving dogs, because they thought I was trying to use her fame and status. That pain hadn't stayed online. It had followed me into real life. It had burned. It had scarred. And none of that happened without Ryan. Somewhere nearby, my fingers trembled slightly. So this again? Another sweet gesture in public. Another misunderstanding. Another reason for people to target me later. I looked up at Chloe, my voice low and hoarse. "What now?" I asked. "You want everyone to misunderstand us again? You want them to think there's something between us so they can finish the job this time?" Chloe's face changed immediately, before she could speak. Someone in the crowd muttered something about me trying to cling to the Prescott family again. That was all it took. Chloe turned so fast her cap nearly slipped enough. Her voice cracked like a whip. The entire crowd went still. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were colder than I had seen in a long time. "Listen carefully," she said, scanning the students around us. "The Prescott family has only ever had one young master." Then she pointed at me. "Him." A stunned silence fell. Chloe's expression grew even harsher. "As for Ryan," she continued, each word clearer than the last, "he works for our household." Since when did that become the same thing as being a Prescott? The change in the crowd was instant. Shock, embarrassment, suspicion, and then, inevitably, their attention shifted toward Ryan. His face turned pale so quickly it almost looked unreal. For the first time all afternoon, his lips parted, but no words came at first. Then his eyes reddened again, and tears spilled down as if some inner dam had burst. "So what if I worked for your family?" he said, his voice shaking. "At least everything I have, I earn with my own hands. People like you were born with everything already waiting for you. You don't know what it's like to claw your way up from nothing." He took a step back, chest rising and falling fast. "You can look down on my status all you want," he said, "but that doesn't make me less than any of you." Then he turned and ran. Perfect timing, perfect exit, perfect victim. I heard a few girls nearby suck in shocked breaths. Someone whispered that Ryan was too pitiful. Someone else muttered that something about the whole thing felt off. Chloe remained where she was. Expression complicated. I didn't stay to study it. By the time I returned to the Prescott house that evening, sky had already darkened. I had delayed on purpose, hoping everyone would be calmer by then. I should have known better. The moment I stepped inside, I saw Ryan sitting in the center of the living room sofa, eyes red, face pale, surrounded by my three sisters, as if he were the one who had been wronged beyond repair. For a split second, that image overlapped with another one in my memory, the last scene from my previous life. My hands went cold. Jessica was the first to look up. Her face was expressionless, which somehow made it worse. Chloe seemed restless, as if she wanted to come toward me, but she stayed where she was. Olivia's gaze was unreadable. Then Jessica spoke. "Ethan," she said this time, "you've gone too far." Stood at the doorway and didn't move. Too far? I almost wanted to ask what exactly I had done. Was it excessive to stay silent while people smeared me? Was it excessive not to defend myself? Was it excessive that Ryan let everyone mistake his identity, fed them half-truths, and watched them drag my name through filth? But of course, none of that mattered in this house. If Ryan cried first, he won first, and no one cared that the weight of everything that happened before had left me exhausted, wary, and unable to trust a single one of them. I looked at the brightly lit room, at the people inside it, and suddenly understood something with complete clarity. No matter how familiar this place looked, it was no longer mine, so I remained at the threshold, hands at my sides, and did not take even one step forward, because this house had already stopped being a home for me. Chloe's expression shifted abruptly, as if a veil had been torn from her eyes. She took a step toward me, then another, her voice unsteady for the first time in what felt like forever. "Ethan, you," before she could finish. Ryan's system shrieked inside the silence. Warning. Chloe affection -10. Current affection 40. Warning. Chloe affection -10. Current affection 30. Warning. Olivia affection -10. Current affection 40. The alerts overlapped one after another, cold and mechanical. Like a countdown to something ugly, Chloe and Olivia's affection values kept dropping in turns. As though the ground beneath Ryan's carefully built act was finally starting to collapse. Only Jessica remained still. She said nothing. She merely looked at me with those deep, unreadable eyes of hers, her expression giving away absolutely nothing. Ryan clearly noticed it too, and like a drowning man spotting driftwood, he immediately threw himself toward Jessica. Clutching her hand with trembling fingers, tears streamed down his face, his voice breaking perfectly at every word. "You know, I'm not that kind of person. I never cared about the Prescott family's money. What matters to me was always all of you. You gave me a home. You made me feel what family is. Maybe Ethan just feels threatened by me. So he what?" Olivia cut him off. Her voice was calm, but there was ice beneath it. "You came into the Prescott house not for money. Who exactly do you expect to believe that?" She stared at him sharply. "If you truly didn't care about wealth, then when Ethan gave you limited edition clothes, expensive watches, and sports cars, why didn't you refuse? Where was that backbone you're always talking about now?" Ryan's face stiffened. Chloe, who had always been the slowest to notice the cracks, finally seemed to understand what Olivia meant. Her cheeks flushed with anger, and she stepped forward as well. "Exactly," she snapped. "If status meant nothing to you, then why were you so eager to go to school with Ethan in the Prescott car? Why didn't you correct anyone when they mistook you for the Prescott family's young master? You didn't stay silent because you didn't care. You stayed silent because you cared too much." System's warnings became even more frantic. Ryan's face turned deathly pale. In an instant, the affection he had painstakingly built with Chloe and Olivia was almost gone. And yet, even then, he still clung to Jessica as if she were his final chance. Jessica looked down at him for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, her gaze softened slightly. She lifted a hand and gently brushed his hair back, her voice low and controlled. "Ryan, don't be afraid. As long as you haven't done anything wrong, I will stand by you." She paused. "So don't disappoint me." Ryan leaned against her as though he had finally found shelter. But when no one else was looking, he lifted his eyes toward me. That glance was full of provocation, full of triumph. So that was his confidence. Even if Chloe and Olivia turned against him, it wouldn't matter as long as Jessica remained on his side. After all, Jessica was the true pillar of the Prescott family. If he could secure her completely, then everything else was still within reach. I heard his thoughts turn sharply inward, speaking to the system again. Since Olivia and Chloe are already unstable, use whatever affection they have left and unlock Jessica's next plot event. The system hesitated. Host, are you certain? Once affection values fall into the negative range, the situation changes entirely. These female supporting characters may come to hate you completely. Ryan didn't care. They're just supporting characters, he replied coldly. Even if they hate me, how much trouble can they really cause? Hurry up. A beat later, the system responded, exchange. Successful. Olivia, affection -10. Chloe, affection -20, new plot point. Unlocked, Jessica will encounter a maritime accident during a contract signing in half a month. If host prepares in advance and rescues her successfully, her affection will rise significantly at once. Satisfaction flickered across Ryan's face. Confidence, calculation, greed, he thought he had already won. I watched him silently, and a cold smile formed in my heart. Fine, then I sincerely wished him success. May he rescue Jessica smoothly. May she be moved beyond reason. May the two of them become inseparable. If he wanted to tie himself to the Prescott family so badly, then perhaps he truly should marry into it and stay forever. What a blessing that would be for all of us, eh? Man who wanted to ruin the Prescott family. Welcomed into its center, a man clinging to the eldest sister while drawing the other two into his orbit. How fortunate, how poetic. As long as they all stayed away from me, they could do whatever they wanted. I was tired of being dragged into their madness. Jessica kept looking at me. Her expression was far too complicated for me to read, but I no longer had the energy to guess what she was thinking. Maybe she wanted to drive me out again. Maybe she was searching for the right words. Maybe it didn't matter this time. I didn't wait for her. I left the Prescott house on my own. I packed my belongings, took everything that was mine, and transferred all my remaining money into a new bank account before walking away. Unlike my last life, I wasn't careless enough to leave myself with nothing. At the very least, I would not end up rotting in some ruined shack again after I moved out. Olivia and Chloe started visiting me more often, whether it was guilt or performance. I couldn't tell. Every time they looked at me, there was a trace of pity in their eyes. Olivia came by whenever she could, trying to talk to me gently, almost as if she were teaching a wounded child how to speak again. When I gave her no response, she would leave with disappointment written all over her face. Chloe suggested taking me to a specialist more than once. Each time, I only shook my head. I refused. Half a month later, I received an invitation to an art exhibition at sea hosted by a painter I had admired for years. Without thinking too much about it, I accepted, but once I boarded the cruise ship, I realized the exhibition itself occupied only a small part of the vessel. The rest of the ship had been arranged for wealthy businessmen, investors, and prominent guests who treated the event as little more than elegant entertainment. And there, among the crowd, I saw Jessica standing beside her in a well-fitted suit. Looking polished and composed as ever was Ryan. He seemed completely unsurprised to see me, almost as if he had expected me. A faint, mocking smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then I heard his inner voice again, smooth and venomous. Since someone has to die in this plot point, why shouldn't it be Ethan? If he hadn't been born into the Prescott family, he would be nothing. Better that he becomes my stepping stone. At least his death would be useful. Fingers turned cold. Jessica had seen me too. Her brows drew together at once, and a strange unease passed over her face. She turned to Ryan as if asking him something. But before she could look back, I had already disappeared into the moving crowd. Still, Ryan's voice lingered in my ears like a curse. Go on, Ethan. Keep acting proud while you can. Let's see who gets the last laugh in the end. I should have known Ryan would never settle for something small. Even after everything I had already seen, I still underestimated how far he was willing to go. The gallery on the cruise liner had been beautiful in a hollow, extravagant way. Crystal lights reflected over polished floors. Paintings worth fortunes lined the walls. Wealthy guests drifted from one room to another with champagne in hand, laughing as if the sea beneath us wasn't deep enough to swallow the entire ship whole. I kept my distance from the crowd. I kept my distance from Jessica, and most of all, I kept my distance from Ryan. But apparently, distance meant nothing to a man who had already decided how the night should end. One moment. I was standing near a landscape painting, reading the artist's notes beside the frame. The next, a handkerchief pressed over my mouth from behind. The scent was sharp and chemical. My body went weak almost immediately. I fought. I remember trying to twist free. Hearing shoes scrape against the floor and someone curse under their breath. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, the first thing I felt was the wind. It cut across my face like a knife. The second thing I felt was the rope digging into my wrists. My eyes flew open. I was hanging over open water, the ship's steel. Hull rose above me like a cliff, and beneath my feet, black waves slammed against the sides again and again. The sea was violent, restless, and far too far below. Every swing of the rope made my stomach drop, a few feet away from me. Hanging from another rope was Ryan, of course. The moment he saw that I was conscious, his expression changed. His eyes reddened at once, and tears spilled so quickly it was almost impressive. "Jessica," he shouted upward, voice raw with panic. "Ethan's awake. Save Ethan first. Don't worry about me, life doesn't matter." What a performance. Even half-dazed, I understood immediately. This wasn't a kidnapping. Not really. This was a stage, and Ryan had written the script. Above us, I heard footsteps pounding across the deck. A man leaned over the railing and looked down. He was dressed too well to be hired muscle, but his smile was rotten enough to make up for it. "Well, Miss Prescott," he called lazily. "Time to choose. One is your real brother. The other is the one your heart keeps protecting. Since you can't save both at once, tell me which one matters more." So that was the point. Not money, not revenge, not even murder. At least not directly. Ryan wanted Jessica to choose. He wanted to carve that decision into me so deeply that even if I survived, I would never forget it. He wanted me to watch my own sister reach for him instead of me. He wanted me to break if this had happened in my previous life. Maybe it would have worked, but that version of me was already dead. Whatever hope, hurt, and desperate longing I had once carried for my family had been buried long ago. By now, I cared less about who Jessica chose than whether I could get out of this alive. Lifted my head just enough to look upward. Jessica stood near the railing, pale but steady. Her hand rose slowly. For one brief second, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then she pointed. "Bring Ryan up first," she said. The man above burst into laughter. "Interesting. So blood means that little to you?" My rope jerked violently. One of the men beside him bent down as if to help Ryan. But instead, with a quick flick of a blade, he sliced halfway, through one of the support lines holding me. The strand snapped with a sickening sound. Now only one rope remained. The whole weight of my body shifted, and I swung hard over the water. The man's smile vanished. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" he said coldly. "You tried to trick me. You thought if you pretended to favor this one, I'd let my guard down about your brother." I narrowed my eyes so even he had seen through Jessica's answer. Interesting, then. Maybe her choice hadn't meant what Ryan thought it meant, or maybe it did. At that point, I honestly didn't care. Ryan, however, clearly cared very much. I could almost hear his thoughts unraveling. This wasn't supposed to happen. His arrangement had gone wrong somewhere. Whatever terms he had discussed with these people, they were no longer following them. Jessica's face finally changed. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Name it." The man smiled again. "That's better. I want more than apologies. Withdraw from the South Bay development bid. Hand over the Prescott Logistics contract, too. and maybe I'll consider letting one of them live, even from where I hung. I went still. That second demand was wrong. That contract was never supposed to be part of this, in my last life. That deal became important much later. So why was it being brought up now? Ryan looked just as shaken. For the first time since I woke up, real panic flashed across his face. He coughed lightly, like he was trying to warn the man to stop talking. But the response he got was brutal. One of his own ropes was slashed partway through. The man glanced at him with open contempt. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Aren't you the one who gave me half this information? Now you want to pretend you don't know me?" Ryan froze. Every trace of his carefully arranged sorrow shattered. "What are you talking about?" He snapped too fast, too loud. "I never said anything to you." He tried to signal with his eyes, tried to recover, tried to put the mask back on, but it was too late. A deal with wolves only works. If you can control the wolves... Ryan had mistaken borrowed foresight for real power. He thought knowing a few future events made him untouchable. He forgot that people like this didn't serve him. They used him. The wind rose suddenly. The ship lurched. The waves below swelled into dark. Heaving walls, then the last rope holding me groaned. Ryan screamed first, "Jessica, save me." For a single stunned heartbeat, even I thought she would run to him. Instead, Jessica moved toward me fast. Too fast for me to understand. By the time my rope snapped, she was already over the rail. The impact of the water hit like concrete, but Jessica reached me first. She grabbed hold of me with both arms and pulled me against her, twisting at the last second, so her body took the worst of the force instead of mine. The sea swallowed us whole. Salt burned my throat and eyes. Waves crashed over our heads. I felt her struggling to keep us up, coughing, dragging breath between mouthfuls of seawater. Still, her arm never loosened. "Ethan," she said hoarsely, one hand gripping the back of my neck to keep my face above water. "Don't panic. I've got you." Stared at her. Even in that chaos, even with freezing water dragging us down, I could only think one thing. What are you doing now? What role is this supposed to be? Wasn't this the part where you chose Ryan? Wasn't this the part where I disappeared quietly so the two of you could move on without me? Jessica's jaw tightened, as if she had heard the accusation, even though I never said it aloud. Before I could think further, bright searchlights cut across the waves, then came the engines, fast rescue boats, exactly on time. I had made the arrangements before boarding. I didn't know Ryan's full plan, but I knew enough to expect something ugly. So I left instructions, a location schedule, and an emergency report with both a private rescue company and the police. If anything happened offshore, they were to move immediately. That precaution was the only reason none of us died. I was hauled onto a speedboat half-conscious, shaking so hard my teeth wouldn't stop knocking together. Someone wrapped a thermal blanket around my shoulders. A second later, Jessica stripped off her outer coat and draped it over me too. Even though she herself was soaked through, only then did she look back. Farther out. Ryan was still in the water. A wave had dragged him much farther from the ship than anyone expected. By the time another team reached him, he was barely conscious. Once we were back on deck, chaos took over. Police flooded the area. Security shouted into radios. Guests screamed or crowded together in stunned clusters. The suited man looked around at the officers closing in and went white with rage, who called the police. He roared. I looked at him from where I sat wrapped in blankets, then let out a weak, humorless laugh. Who else? Of course it was me, if I had learned anything from dying once already. It was this. Never walk into Ryan's shadow without preparing an exit. Jessica turned toward me. For the first time that night, something changed in her expression. It wasn't relief. It wasn't guilt either. It was something tighter, stranger, as if she wanted to say something and didn't know how. Her lips moved slightly, almost forming a smile, but in the end no expression settled there at all. She only kept looking at me, and I looked away. Jessica stood outside the glass with a face so calm it was almost cruel. On the other side, Ryan looked like a shadow of the man he used to be. The sharpness in his features had collapsed into something gaunt and sickly. His cheeks were hollow, his lips pale, and yet the moment he saw Jessica, hope flared in his eyes like a dying fire, catching one last breath. "Jessica," said hoarsely, stumbling closer to the partition. "You came. I knew you would. I knew you wouldn't leave me here." His hand pressed against the glass. Then his gaze shifted to me, and instantly his expression changed. Panic flashed across his face, followed by the same old calculation. "Don't believe him," he blurted out. "Everything that happened on the ship Thun planned it. He set me up. He wanted you to hate me. Jessica, you know me?" "I would never," Jessica laughed. It was a quiet sound, but it carried more contempt than any scream could have. "Still acting?" she asked. Ryan froze. For the first time, real fear showed on his face. He started speaking to the system again in his head, so frantically that even I could almost feel the chaos in his system. "What is happening? Isn't her affection high enough? Why is she talking to me like this? Check her status." Now, the answer came broken, unstable, full of static. System error. Host condition unstable. External interference detected. Rechecking target affection. Failed. Ryan's breathing turned ragged. "That's impossible." "Ow!" he whispered. "That's impossible." Jessica's gaze remained cold. "It seems," she said softly, "your little crutch isn't as all-knowing as you thought." Both of us stared at her, Ryan in terror, me in shock. I knew about the system because I had heard it, because I had lived through its schemes before. But Jessica's words made one thing painfully clear. She knew too. Ryan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Jessica didn't bother explaining. She simply looked at him the way one might look at something filthy that had finally been exposed. "Under bright light, you wanted out, didn't you?" "Ow," she said. "Coincidentally, Olivia's research team has been working with a government lab. They're very interested in anomalies related to cognition, memory, and foreign signal structures. Someone like you should be useful." Ryan's face drained of all color. "No," he said immediately, stumbling backward. "No, I'll stay here. I don't want to leave. I'll stay in prison." "Jessica, please," but it was already over. No amount of crying helped him now. No. Performance worked. No pleading softened anyone. He was taken away, still shouting her name. Still promising he had been forced. Still insisting he loved this family more than anything. No one answered him. After Ryan disappeared, the Prescott house became unbearably quiet. Too quiet, it should have felt peaceful instead. It felt like a grave. Without Ryan there, my sisters changed. Or perhaps they simply had no choice except to face what they had become. Jessica stopped hiding behind cold silence. Olivia avoided my eyes less and less, but every time she managed to look at me directly, guilt sat plainly in her face. Chloe grew quieter than I had ever known her to be. She no longer acted like the brightest star in any room. She moved through the house like someone afraid of her own shadow, and all three of them began trying, in their own clumsy ways, to be gentle with me. It should have mattered, maybe once. It would have, but some things break too deeply to be repaired by regret. Olivia was the one who spoke of Ryan most often. She came home less these days because of the lab, but when she did, she brought up dates in a voice that tried and failed to sound clinical. At first we thought it was psychological. She said one evening over dinner, none of us touched. Some kind of dissociation, maybe a delusion tied to trauma. But there's something there. Something abnormal. Chloe looked up. What do you mean? Olivia hesitated, then tapped lightly at her own temple. In his brain, silence spread across the table. When we scanned him, there was a strange cluster embedded near the temporal region. It didn't behave like a lesion. It wasn't organic in the usual sense either. It responded like compressed information. We still can't decode it, but it's there. Jessica's fingers tightened slightly around her glass. And Ryan? She asked. Olivia's expression darkened. His body couldn't handle much. He deteriorated quickly. She didn't need to say more. I understood. They were keeping what was useful and discarding what was not. In the end, even the thing Ryan relied on most had reduced him to a container. Sometime later, Jessica finally asked to speak to me alone. She stood in my doorway for a long time before entering, as if she no longer knew whether she had the right to come in. Only after the door closed did she speak. It wasn't all at once. She said, "The memories, they came back slowly after you left the house. Fragments at first, then more. Enough for me to understand." I looked at her without answering. She lowered her eyes. "I heard your thoughts before I understood why," she continued. "By the time I realized what Ryan was, I couldn't act rashly. If I exposed him too early, he might have turned things around again. So I let him believe I was still under his control." Voice roughened slightly. "I wanted to trap him completely this time. So she really had remembered. Or maybe she'd always been remembering, piece by piece. While I was drowning in my own silence, when she finally looked up, there was no coldness left on her face, only exhaustion, and something painfully close to grief. A week later, I booked my flight. No one tried to stop me at first. Maybe they thought I was only traveling for a short while. Maybe they still believed there would be time later for apologies, for repair, for some impossible return to how things once were. But on the day I left, Jessica came with me to the airport. She carried my suitcase herself. Olivia and Chloe didn't come. I wasn't sure whether they couldn't bear to, or whether Jessica had decided this final moment belonged to her alone. At the security line, she finally asked the question I think she had been swallowing for days. "You're really leaving?" I nodded. "Yes." Her throat moved, but for several seconds she said nothing. Understood what she wanted me to say, that I would come back. Soon, that distance would help. That maybe one day we could still be family. But none of those words belonged to me anymore, no matter what happened to Ryan. No matter what truths had come out in the end, none of it erased what had already been done. Nothing could give me back the versions of myself that died in pain, in silence, in humiliation. Nothing could restore the trust that had been cut apart, piece by piece, by the people I once loved most. I could forgive the world for being cruel, but I could not stay inside the place that taught me I was disposable. So I chose the truth. "I have to go," I said. Jessica went completely still, because that was the first time I had spoken to her directly in so long. My voice was quieter than it used to be. Rougher too, but it was mine. And this time, I was not using it to explain myself. I was using it to choose myself. Tears rose in her eyes so suddenly that she had to look away. But I did not comfort her. Some grief must be carried without rescue. When my turn came, I took my passport, adjusted the strap on my bag, and stepped forward. Beyond the glass walls of the terminal, the sky was impossibly blue. For the first time in longer than I could remember, the future in front of me did not feel like punishment. It felt open, bright, unclaimed. I did not turn back. Not when Jessica whispered my name, not when I heard the hitch in her breathing, not when the last piece of the life I had outgrown stood silently behind me. Because the moment I chose to leave, I had already let them go. The brother they had failed to protect was gone. The boy who spent his whole life begging to be loved was gone too. What remained was only me, and for the first time that was enough.